Welcome to our podcast, Resilient Heroes, where we are dedicated to showcasing the incredible journeys and contributions of women in the field of emergency management. I'm your host, Laura James.
It's a special crossover episode, and I have the amazing Laura James here with us today. Laura, how are you doing?
Thank you. Doing so great and so happy to be here with you, Todd. Thank you for having me.
So now you have an amazing podcast that you're doing, and it's really focusing on women in emergency management, which is awesome. It's called Resilient Heroes, I guess is probably the best way to say it, right?
Heroes, but we call it Heroes. But yes,
yeah,
really highlighting women in emergency management is the focus.
What got you thinking about doing that?
I'll tell you that I have been in the field for just over 20 years, not giving too much away. And I am surrounded by so many outstanding women. And many of us came up during a time when there wasn't a degree in emergency management. So we find ourselves from different backgrounds, from different places, and our voices aren't really out there. Very difficult to find a woman in emergency management being interviewed other than we know at our conferences where we see each other, annually. But there's really not a voice for women in EM. And so I thought, what a great time to try it post-COVID, give a voice to women who have something to say, who are real leaders in our field.
So obviously people who listen to my podcast for a long time know that I'm part of the International Association of Emergency Managers. And then we have a lot of strong women leaders in that organization. Carrie Speranza, for instance, who is our current president, is coming on the heels of two women presidents in a row. So she's a third. Well, no, Justin was in there. So yeah. So anyway, we've had a lot of women presidents in the organization, which I think is great. And we have a lot on the board. How do you try to get more ladies to get involved in emergency management? And how about younger girls that are in high school and college that might be interested in doing EM?
So I'll share a little bit with you about that. So, I am coming to you from Canada. So the folks that I'm engaging are across North America. And really, we've just started the fall of 2024. So we've only dropped 4 episodes so far. We have quite a few in the hopper. And so what we're trying to do is engage women who are currently working in the field, engaging students, and as you said, engaging those students that are moving into post-secondary. And here in Canada, we have a number of programs that will push folks into sort of the emergency services realm. I would say EM is still sort of an enigma for students. They don't really find themselves looking in that direction out of high school. And like you, we have IEM Canada. So we have an association here, lots of chapters across Canada. And in Ontario, where I am, we have the Ontario Association of Emergency Managers. I happen to be the newly elected president of that association.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so we're really pushing forward the student engagement piece. So our plans in 2025 and 2026 are to engage the student community at a post-secondary level with chapters across the various institutions and really engage the students to help us engage the folks that are coming in out of high school and start to have materials and products that will attract them when they're still thinking about where to go with their careers. And I would say that first responders, police, fire, EMS, they got that down. They've got a really great way of engaging folks at a high school. And so for EM, it's really a begin to push that way, at least in Canada for us. And so I'm hoping the podcast will begin to do some of that.
I think so too. I remember the first time I met somebody who wanted to be an emergency manager from high school was Sarah Roosh, who's now the president of IEM Region 3. And so we met in a class and she's like, yep, that's what I wanted to do. She's involved in the flood in her community and knew that's what she wanted to do as emergency management. And since then I've ran into other kids who, college kids, and I teach as well, that are like, yeah, this is what I wanted to do. I learned about it either through volunteering or through some other through some other way. And they said this is what they want to do. They weren't interested in becoming a first responder first or anything like that. I think it's amazing to see that people are looking at this career. And then the second part about that too is realistically, it's a really interesting conversation when you look at in the universities, at least when you start looking at public policy and emergency management and the crossover that it has into all other areas of responsibility, such as public planning, public health, land use stuff. So there's such a vast on the education side conversation that we could be having with emergency management. I know I'm going down the wonky hole right now, but
I totally agree with you. So my background, my degree is actually in forestry. So I started in that sort of natural resources realm, and as working for the government at the time in planning, so land management, but also flood and fire forecasting. So that's sort of how I found my way into emergency management. So it's not unusual for folks to find that, though I'm finding, Todd, as I interview more women and really connect with them, a lot found their way here, sort of as you said, through community engagement, whether that was volunteering or some faith-based organization that put them, out in the world as part of a hurricane response. So I'm finding women are coming to it in different ways beyond sort of the academia. Mm-hmm. There's something that's happening in their community that's engaging them and wanting them to follow this path.
My wife is a social worker. And so she's, been doing that for many years. And I know a few people that kind of came from the social work realm into emergency management as well, because obviously they get activated, especially when they're dealing with, like my wife deals with the elderly, when they're dealing with like evacuations of certain areas and how to place vulnerable patients or vulnerable people into safe areas. So I get that bridge, right? Of going from that way to the other. And social work specifically is a female dominated, like nursing as a female dominated field. So it makes sense for that bridge to come that way.
It does. Yeah. And I know from you, Todd, I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, sure.
So when we first met, you and I were introduced probably a year and a half ago now. And one of the first conversations I had with you was about women in emergency management and what a supporter you are and a mentor you have been for women in the field. So what brought you to that in your career? I mean, why did you recognize the talents of women and begin to bring those forward in what you do?
I love to learn, and I'm very academically curious on various different things, and I like different perspectives. And I'll give you an example. So when I was working in the field as a paramedic, we have us guys that are just bulls in China shop, and we'll run in and do what we got to do. And then working with women who were paramedics, it was a different, softer, kinder approach, if you will. And I don't mean this in any. This is just I don't know. I'm doing a generalization strokes here, but that was what. And so what I learned working, and one of my preceptors when I was going through paramedic school, she was a nurse and a paramedic, and what I learned from her was like really great bedside manner, right? And so like I learned that, like, oh yeah, I could be like a really, I could know my medicine very well, but if I don't have great bedside manner, patients aren't going to trust me, right? And so Mary Preska is her name. Give her a shout out. And so she taught me how to be a better caregiver as far as pre-hospital care. And so I learned a lot from that. And I have sisters, right? Obviously, I got 4 of them rolling around and then, and whatnot. So I've learned a lot on how to do things in a different way from a different perspective and to be open to that. And then when I come into emergency management, a lot of the people who when I first moved over to this world, I was trying to think of the number, like 5 or 6, maybe 7 of the first people who I worked with were women who really
Wow.
helped me get my bearings and really kind of said, okay, this is the way you do things. And I'll give another shout out to the person who's out there is from Brea, the city of Brea where I live. Her name is Anna Cave, and she was wonderful, and she was like a wonderful person to speak to and learn from. And so how can you not support and you want to get more women involved in emergency management when you can see their perspective and realistically learn from each other, right?
Yes.
And so that's kind of, I think, my path to really encouraging ladies to get involved in emergency management.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, Anna Kay was she's retired now, and she lives in Texas, and she was a force to be reckoned with for sure in the field of emergency management. So, and then of course now the other side of it too is I'm a girl dad, so
that helps.
yeah. So I got a 12-year-old who thinks she's 30, and yeah, so
I've got a 15-year-old who thinks she's 45, so we're equal. There you go. And she reminds me every morning she'll be on the road in just a few months. So
oh god, yeah,
watch out.
so yeah, I think right now some of the work that we're doing with IEM is working realistically on diversity and emergency management.
Yeah.
And when we look at diversity and emergency management, it doesn't just have to be diversity of color or of it's of thought, right?
Yes.
And I think that's one of those critical things that we're bringing in. And we have a strong female leader in that world as well. And I'm excited to see the work that they're doing there. So it's just amazing to see that idea of hearing from different people's perspectives. And I think we need more of that, not less.
Agreed. That's really my mission in giving a voice to more women out there. And regardless of their experience, whether it's positive or negative or somewhere in between, allowing us to engage and have a conversation and even become colleagues and supporters. So, this, planning, exercises, training, those are blue sky days.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the gray sky, the worst days, those are where, our real friendships are made and the real connections that bring you together. And what I'm finding is the women that I'm talking to or who are reaching out now, because there's a lot of excitement growing about Resilient Heroes, just want to say how they feel and what their experiences have been, and encourage each other and say, listen, there are really tough days, but we're here together and let's build a community together so we can connect. And so, for example, at IAM this year in Colorado, I saw you. I was able to connect with people who have been on Resilient Heroes so far, who've done a recording, and have a drink, go for a walk, share some experience so that the next time that I'm activated or helping in an emergency response, I'll think to myself, hey, Christy had a really great idea about that. I'm going to try and implement that. And it's really just sharing a forum for us to share our voices. And what I would say is, Todd, you're exactly right, is we're seeing lots of women moving up now. And I love that. But there's still, I would say, some hesitation to give a loud and proud voice to what we say sometimes. And this is allowing women to really share some of those experiences in finding their voice, what makes them a really great planner or what makes them a really great section chief. What are those things, and how did you find the voice and the strength to do that? Because we don't all have great mentors, and it's still a tough go sometimes. So I think that we're stronger together, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that was my theme for my for when I ran for IAM region for IAM president or second vice president, right? It's stronger together, and I really truly believe that. I'll tell you one thing. What I find interesting, and I don't know if it's cultural or why, but there are times when I have to encourage some of the girls I say girls not in a bad way, that I work with to be more vocal.
Yes.
And I'm like, just say it, you know, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm like, and that's just the ladies too, sometimes the guys too, but like it seems to be like the my female partners want to work like behind the scenes to get things done, and they're not like really ready to engage like in the public setting. And it's like, no, you can do this. You can say things, and you know, it's like, say how you feel, what you need to get, you know, it needs to get the word out. I don't know where the I don't say fear, maybe it is fear, where that comes from.
It is, I think it's fear and hesitation. It's a combination.
Sure. Yeah. But that's one thing I'd like to do is, like, you know, make sure that we're in this place where you might get beat up.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course.
I mean, prepare for those licks. You know, you're going to see something that's going to piss somebody off and you might get beat up a little bit.
Yeah.
But don't take it personal. You know? And I think that's part of it.
And I think so, encouraging women to have a voice. And I'm going to give a shout out to one of my mentors. She was a director back when I was in my environmental days at a conservation authority. And her name is Deb Martin Downs. And she was the director of, you know, the I think it was, can't even remember, science and engineering department at the time. And I said, I have this great proposal for, you know, flood risk management, public education, because there's a hole there and we're not doing enough of it. And she said, write a proposal. So I did, encouraged me to write a proposal, and then gave me feedback on that. And then said, what if we've come up with a partnership? So one day a week, you can work on this specific project. And then now, years later, a decade later, that's a full program with a full staff complement of, you know, a number of staff that are doing that full time. And I think to myself, that was one woman who recognized, you know, an opportunity, gave another woman the time and place to propose it and bring it forward and make it successful. And, you know, more people like that are helpful, who give voice to ideas.
Do you know who Dr. Lucy Jones is?
I don't.
She's a world-renowned seismologist.
Okay, I like that already.
And then here in California, you know, she is still, even though she's retired, she's like that go-to person. Every time there's an earthquake, she's the one who's all over TV.
Of course.
And we had a symposium, and she spoke. And after there's some questions, and somebody asked a question regarding her, you know, with female scientists, right? And so obviously she was going to school, you know, back in the 70s, where there weren't a lot of female seismologists. And her answer was kind of interesting because, and she's definitely, like, you know, a powerhouse, right? Like, she's the person who walks in the room and everybody stops and listens to what she says. But the interesting thing is, she's like, basically her answer was, we've crossed that bridge, we've already gone over it, and there's enough female scientists in seismology that it's not a problem, basically, right? Now, she goes, the problem is getting people to, you know, the policymakers just to listen to seismologists, let alone whether it's a male or female.
Exactly.
But she's like, we have enough people, we have enough women now. Not enough. That sounds like there's a limit. But there's plenty of women going to school. Matter of fact, if you look at the statistics now, there's more women in higher education going to school than and completing degrees than men are. So it's not that ladder, that ceiling, if you will, has been busted. Right now, the other side of it, though, is, and I say this in the way of going, how do we then parlay that into saying, okay, now I'm a leader.
Yes.
Right. And how do we get girls, and I'm thinking about my daughter at this point, like, how do we get them to say, okay, I'm confident enough to lead? Because I think that's where when it comes to boys, there's an over exuberance of confidence, you know. I mean, like, almost to the point where you got to tap them down a little bit, go, hey, slow down there, cowboy. You know, you'll get there. You know, there's an over exuberance of like, okay, I'm going to take charge and I'm going to do this, right or wrong, and we'll make things work, right? but I don't, that's the other side of it, is like, how do we get that? How do we get the girls to get to that level of going, I can come and take charge of this room?
Listen, if I had the actual answer to that, then I would be a bazillionaire. But what I'll tell you is the hesitation around speaking your mind or having a voice for women. While we exist in emergency management, I'm not speaking for all women, but in my experience, it's tough. It is a tough go to raise your voice above the male voices in the room, especially, and I would say this from my own experience, when the voices in the room who are chiefs are very often male. And so to challenge that from a non-first responder position, regardless of your skills and expertise, can be tough. And I also think it depends on who you report to. And I hate to say that, but if you know your voice is not going to be supported in the room, then you're going to hesitate. And I've done this in my own past. I have a great idea. I might text it to my director in a meeting instead of saying it myself. And I think to myself now, as I enter my 50s, to say, why would I have done that? Why wouldn't I have just put up my hand and said, this is a great idea? How about this? Or maybe the solution is that. And I'll tell you, because I feel like I was automatically dismissed in some cases. And so in the way, when you say, how do we bolster this for the people coming up? I think I had a great dad. I had a really strong father figure who made sure I could change a tire and change the oil. And, if you want to go into forestry, you're going to be one of the only girls, but you do it. So I was encouraged from a very young age to be strong in my personality and in my voice. That doesn't stop me from hesitating every once in a while. But I really think you have to be encouraged by the people around you, which is why I think something like Resilient Heroes, where we say to the women, use your voice. We're stronger together. Your words, we're stronger together. Everybody at the table has the authority to share their knowledge, skills, and experience. And I think that is where our voices hesitate. And the other thing I'll share with you, and I'm not shy to share it, is that I have a super strong personality. Like, I can be very gregarious. I'm loud. I'm not shy. And I'm lucky that that's the case, but I would still hesitate. When you're in a room of politicians, when you're in a room of executives, everybody has a little bit of nervousness, but you and I are now at an age where we're experts and we know we're known as experts, so we don't hesitate. But how do you, somebody with 1 or 2 years or just coming in out of school, how do you give them the gas behind them to speak their mind? And I have had lots of people call me various things over the years that I would say my counterparts are not subjected to the same type of name calling because they're just a strong personality, or that's just who they are. Or, I have to challenge those when they happen. And, some of that challenging has to happen behind the scenes because you're not going to just speak up and defend yourself in an EOC activation. You're going to say, okay, let's move on and take a breath and deal with it after the fact. But I think really encouraging folks to speak their mind. And I don't care what gender you are or where you come from or your background. You're here because we value you. You're either an external partner or you work for us or you're here for a reason. And the reason is you have a voice at the table. So let's give it to everyone who's at the table.
Yeah, I mean, I have witnessed more than a few heated verbal arguments. I may have been involved in a couple of those, but I've also seen, although I have not been involved in this, where back in the day when I first started off, where you get guys fist fighting over things, right? And you watch it, and it's okay. There goes the fist fight. I know that's not the way to handle things, but it's just an interesting way to see. This is the other thing too is. I'm going to butcher it. I had a college professor of mine when I was going through a master's program talking about those of us that are coming from the blue collar world, and we're getting educated, but we still have that like blue collar swagger, if you will, along with it. We just happen to be overeducated blue collar people, as it is.
Hey.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we kind of bring that swagger to the boardroom sometimes, which doesn't necessarily play well with others, and I had to learn how to polish those rough edges that I had when I walked into the room.
What I'll say is that in the last decade, I have seen such a vast improvement in that regard. I feel it in my last position prior to my role at BCG. I worked directly for 5 fire chiefs, amalgamating their emergency management programs so they could support each other from small communities. So every single interaction, training, exercise, or full activation of their EOC was compassionate and caring and enthusiastic for everyone at play. And I have to say that is different and not how it was even a decade ago. And I would give kudos to all of those fire chiefs because they're beyond inclusive in hearing the voices that are supporting their response. And that's very different than, my experience. And so I feel like while we're all struggling with the different ways to bring diversity and inclusion in, I'm seeing at the top some real change happening. So, well, let's see what Laura thinks. Those kind of things I wouldn't have seen before. And they're humongous strides forward. But you're right. There is still some of that, you call it sort of blue collar amalgamation or transition. There is that goes on for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like, when you've had to have the tough skin and the in more ways, not just physical, and also the mental tough skin and being able to take it. Sometimes you bring that to the boardroom, and it can be kind of jarring to people who haven't lived in that world. And the bad part about that is sometimes that makes people dismiss those conversations.
I agree. The other, while we're talking about this sort of interactions in the boardroom or the operations center, I really feel that women can see the whole operation in a different way. We think about health and safety at site inside the yellow tape or in an evacuation center. But I always find things like health and safety of the staff who are supporting the EOC will fall off. And if I put, if I give the role of that to a woman, or even myself, if I'm a director and looking at my people, I can see when people are struggling. I'm able to read the room and say, hey, go take a break, or find an empty office and take 15 minutes, or call your wife or partner,
right.
Because I feel them in a different way, I think, than just staff. I feel them as a person, and I feel like the bubble of my EOC is my community. And I'm able to read the room in ways I think that are not traditional and not part of a traditional checklist.
It's funny you say that. I had one of the girls that worked for me. She was our EOC manager, and when I was working as director, and she knew when I needed to go.
Yeah.
And she would say, "Oh, hey, Todd, I need to see you in your office for a second." I'd be like, "Okay," and I'd walk in, and she's like, "Eat food, sit in here for 15 minutes, don't come out because you're starting to become an ass."
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, got it. All right, I got it. And so I needed food, I needed coffee, I needed to be away to charge up a little bit, and she wouldn't let anybody bother me.
Yeah.
For that time, she's like, being here till basically she put me on timeout.
Exactly. But we'll call it a mental health break. But yeah. And I think it is a necessary skill, especially, we know we're working long hours and stressful situations and politically time sensitive and, health and safety, and we're seeing awful things, but I can feel the people. And even if I don't know them very well, I can still sense that the tone of voice is affecting a whole team or a whole section. And it's time to just say, hey, let's go get coffee, or should we walk around the block? Or, there's something to be said for that soft skill that isn't traditional part of our response organization.
Right. And that's, I mean, and she was critical to that room,
Yeah. Yeah.
of
100%.
managing us as humans,
Yeah.
and and she was great at what she did. I remember we were getting phone calls one time. I mean, it was just during the middle of an activation. Super stressful, high profile event, media everywhere. Um, and I handed her my phone. I said, only phone call I want to take right now is either from the chief or from my wife. I don't want to talk to anybody else.
Right.
And she's like, okay. And she made it happen.
Yeah.
She took that phone stress off
of you.
my plate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, and just those little things like that. And for her to be able to see that and be there, she was a great partner to work with, and kind of miss working with her. She's in Long Beach now. Yeah. But I don't know. It was great. So having that person in your, and I think you're right. I think, and whether it's innate or whatever, I think you have more women are in tune to that more than men.
I agree.
And I think it's a good thing.
It's an inherent sort of, again, I would say it's a soft skill that it's inherent in many of us. We're nurturers and mothers and daughters, and we know throughout history that we work better as a community of women supporting each other. So it's natural, I think, that we find ourselves in that space in emergency management. And I think acknowledging those strengths can only bolster our response and, the resiliency of our communities, which is, I think, what we're talking about when we talk about diversity and inclusion, is the resiliency of our communities. So yeah, the more voices of women that I can hear out there, the better. And the other thing, Todd, is you talked a little bit about social workers transitioning into this. And I think I'm seeing more and more of that. Whether it's nurses or social workers or people that have had some kind of psychology or counseling background, I'm seeing more and more of those folks moving over into this world of first responders and emergency managers. And I love to see that too, because those are the skills that we need. And sometimes, those are the tough conversations we have to have after a response, is how are we recovering for ourselves emotionally and psychologically, and how do we bridge that gap? And I think women are starting to make those conversations much more comfortable, in that we do that all the time. that's our one of our really great skills. And so I want the hot wash to include a required psychological debrief. And I want you to know that I'm here for you. And if you actually need 2 weeks, then say it. Say that that's what you need. Showing strength and marching on is not necessarily in your best interest or that of your organization. So let's call a spade a spade. And we're doing that in leaps and bounds more than we ever have been. But I think it's a skill we're bringing to the table. Let's talk about it. I want to talk about our feelings. Had a shitty shift. Everybody yelled at each other. Before we all go home the day shift, can we have a moment together and just say, hey, Todd, I'm sorry I yelled at you. And I'm really sorry I swore at you. But I'm looking forward to tomorrow, and I really value you. Those types of conversations shouldn't wait till the end of an activation, right? They should be happening at the end of a shift, where we chat about those things. There's no hard feelings. The last thing I need on my drive home is to think about how Todd and I were pissed off at each other for 5 minutes. That doesn't negate all the work we did in that 12-hour shift. It just means it was a hot 5 minutes, right? And I think those conversations can only strengthen our responses together.
We're building a program, excuse me, in Orange County. There's seven people building this program together, and I was one of the leaders on this. It was myself and Michelle Rivard at the time with the Anaheim Fire Department, and we were the co-chairs of this group. And we would be in this room, and we knew it was going to be full of passion, full of argument. There was a lot of different viewpoints, and I said I left room in these meetings. Said, okay, we met at the end of the day, and my thing was at the end of these meetings, we're all going to go out and grab a drink together.
Exactly.
Because we're going to be in this room yelling at each other, and it's okay. It's okay to be passionate about it. It's okay to be hot, in the way you talk, even if sometimes it might get, unbeknownst, like disrespectful. You're not meaning to be, you know what I mean. And then you get to have that beer or even a cola if you don't drink, and sit there outside of the room and say, hey, I didn't really mean to say anything that was disrespectful. I was just being, and then you walk away and you can still stay friends.
Exactly.
And I think that's the critical part, or at least stay working together, not never want to be in a room. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's critical, but we don't do that enough, I think, anymore. When I first grew up in the fire service, it really was, it truly was like you were it. I mean, it was your life, right? Everything was in a positive way, not a negative way. Everything revolved around the fire department and the people who you worked with. Nowadays, everybody lives so far away from each other. It's not, we had a bar at our fire station. I mean, it was just the old school, right? I was old school way, right? But I mean, those things have changed, which is, maybe for the better. But the other side of it is like you said, have that debrief before you leave shift. Make sure that it's all from a good space, and otherwise it could be. I mean, I worked for an agency where it got to the point where I was miserable and I didn't want to go every day, and I left. And I just couldn't. I just did not want to show up to work. And it was, I kind of bummed out that it ended that way, but it's just the way it was for me. And I didn't, and the problem is we were at the culture of suck it up, or, buttercup. And if you don't like it, there's the door, there was nobody saying, hey, what's going on. And I realized afterwards, and this is just, I've talked about this before, years afterwards, I realized that the reason why I wasn't, enjoying my job anymore, and it really impacted a lot of stuff, impacted my home life, impacted work. I was suffering from DPTSD after a pretty significant event, and I didn't realize that's what it was, because I came from the school of suck it up. I didn't talk about it with anybody, and I just walked away. Nowadays it's a good thing that we do have these debriefs and really take a look at mental health as being a core part of what we do. And Carrie Speranza for IEM president for USA, that's one of our core beliefs too, with the IEM Strong, is really getting people to go through and think about what we do and what we see and who we're serving, and the stresses that these jobs have on us, and to be a healthier mentally health for our responders. I thank you, Laura, for picking up that torch as well.
Yeah. I mean, you're a perfect example of that. You're a living example of how much that is required and needed, because when you're going through it, you don't even identify it as that's the cause, right? Right.
And I became a very intolerable person to be around at times, and I knew that, and I wasn't, it was like one of those things that I wasn't even like, I didn't really want to be around myself sometimes, because I was just like,
so like, miserable.
But we worked through it, and everything is good now. But to recognize that is the critical step.
I agree, and I'm really passionate about that. And I just interviewed someone this morning. Actually, she'll be on a future podcast, and she said that she didn't hesitate and took 2 months off after COVID, because she was working 18-hour shifts back to back, 2.5 years. No holidays, no Christmas, everything in her life was on hold. And she just said, I wasn't going to be able to be a good emergency manager if I didn't take time to refocus and revitalize her own desire to be part of the team anymore, because she just was so downtrodden after it. And I think that's part of it, is being able to identify when you're struggling personally. And sometimes it takes somebody to poke you to say, hey, being a jerk. What can we do about this? Todd, do you need a yoga class? Do you want to go for a walk? How about a beer?
I mean, it's absolutely right. Spending some time in the mountains and kind of recentering, and I'll tell you kind of like one of the things that I did is I went to my sister's house on the Hudson River, and it was just like a place that was just like getting back to nature and into my roots and then breathing and going, okay, this is why I'm here and this is what I'm supposed to do, and having that direction again of what we're supposed to be doing. And I think sometimes we can, it doesn't have to be that drastic where you escape to a different state, but at least, take that time for yourself and find that space. And then this is one of those things we're talking about, getting more women involved in the field, is it's allowing us knuckle dragging dudes to go, oh, okay, yeah, there's other options.
Yeah, there's so many options. Yeah.
Besides getting into a fist fight.
There's so many options. And I think, you've said that IAM is moving forward in leaps and bounds in this direction. And I think, both of us have been government workers, and, they're moving in that direction as well, and acknowledging that burnout is real. These jobs are stressful, and the people drawn to these jobs will go all day. We'll go hours and days on end, but we need to acknowledge, and I think women are part of the puzzle that makes us stronger, to say, that's it. I haven't seen my kids. I'm going home to rejuvenate and relax and see my kids. And that is okay. That's okay. That's a priority for the next 8 hours. I'm going to spend some key time at home. Whereas before, and I'm guilty of this too, because I was a single mom for quite some time, to say that I had to go home. That wouldn't be acceptable. I was shy to say, no, I can't do this 12-hour shift back to back for 8 days. I need some family time. Now that I'm older, I recognize that we should support that. We should not think that it's a weakness for people to say, hey, I need this shift to end at 6 p.m. so that I can see my people. And tomorrow when I come back, I'll be revitalized and refreshed because I saw my people. And I think there's still, as you said, a hesitation to speak up with ideas or information or innovation. There is a hesitation on our part to say, there are other things that I need to revitalize me as part of your response organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for doing this and putting Resilient Heroes together and making this a real thing. Tell me a little bit about how people can find you.
So if you follow the QR code, you'll get to a link to the podcast. On every podcast, there is our Resilient Heroes email as well. So if you're interested, then you can email me. If you know some women that you'd like to recommend, I take recommendations as well, sort of behind the scenes, and I'll reach out to those women that you highlight. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. So I'm getting lots of requests through LinkedIn as well, for women that would like a voice and to get involved and engaged. And the other thing, Todd, is I would say we're getting a lot of traction at our emergency management conferences sort of around North America. And there's more and more women coming to chat with me. And so there's some thoughts around, doing some live engagement while we're out in the field and doing what we do. So similar to what you do. And you've been a mentor of mine when it comes to learning the podcast ropes. So I can't thank you enough in that regard. But I also can't thank you enough for being one of the first people I met when I flipped over to be part of the U.S. emergency management field that came forward and said, yeah, I really am a huge supporter of women. And anytime you need anything, reach out to me. You did not hesitate after our first conversation to really become a colleague and friend. So Todd, I can't thank you enough for that as well.
That's my pleasure, for sure. And I'm looking forward to see great things coming from you.
Yeah.
I'll be following your podcast as well, and obviously we're going to support you on that and elevate that, right? And hey, everybody, if I'm telling you, you're following me, please go over and follow Resilient Heroes as well.
Thank you.
I think it's going to be worth your time and worth your effort. So I'm going to let you close out, and then we're 10 seconds away from the end.
Thank you so much. Come and see us at Resilient Heroes, Women in Emergency Management. We want to hear your voices, and students and anybody else. Really, please engage any way you can. The community is strong and growing, and we're better together, as Todd says.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Todd. The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Buffalo Computer Graphics. All content is for informational purposes only. Are you or someone you know a resilient hero and would be interested in contributing to our podcast? We would love to hear from you. Please contact us at RHpodcast@buffalocomputergraphics.com.